What is up, everybody?
Hey, everyone.
It's me and Ryan. We're here to be dumb for a little while. I gotta raise him up just a little bit. And
you raise me up.
All right, we're gonna do.
Starting strong.
Where's my filters here, just to make you just a little less cropped.
If I didn't have a sip of tea, I wouldn't have been able to hit that. I was all scratchy.
Yeah, that's the one. There we go. Sweet. Okay, now we look a little bit less ridiculous. What's up, man?
All good things, brother. How are you?
I'm amazing. I'm glad to be doing this. Hi, everyone out there
cool.
in the world. It's me and Ryan Colt Levy, who is the voice quite prominently of the Chainsaw Man himself. He's just full of teeth and violence, as well as
full of it.
My brother from the same mother, not brother from another mother.
Yeah.
In Fire Emblem Three Houses. We're here today, kind of raising some money for a really awesome cause called NAVA. NAVA is the National Association of Voice Actors, teaming up with Brad. You can see kind of the graphic below me here. Brad Venable, unfortunately, we lost very suddenly 2 years ago. Phenomenal guy, good friend, excellent actor. Brad was the only person who ever made me cry in a workshop. It was like,
not surprising though.
We were in oh man, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Tim Cubison, who is a casting director. And Brad did this like performance of like this. He was playing basically like an abusive father, yelling at his kid. But like as he was yelling at his kid, all the stuff that was making him so angry was like coming out. And it was just like, I remember crying. I'm like, I'm in an educational setting. I need to hold it together.
Gotta keep it together.
He was so good. The dude was so good. Incredible voice. I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you continue, and then I will. No, because I want to gush about him. So you continue this first.
So this is NAVA's the Brad Venable Fund. Brad NAVA is all part of like a sort of network of voice actor led associations, charities, whatever you want to call them, that essentially help voice actors who are just starting out do things like get education, get equipment. In some ways, most importantly, get health insurance. NAVA just did this incredible effort to get basically their own health insurance plan, which is super important because many voice actors don't have health insurance. If they're not in the union, or if they don't make a certain amount of money through the union, they don't get health insurance. They're just sort of out there on their own, and occasionally, like if they have a bad year, they'll get kicked out of the health insurance program, which is just this wild circus that we have actors.
It's too much of a thing, I think. Just like as society, like and like the systems that kind of work everything at large, the fact that artists don't have a safe, guaranteed space to pursue their careers with stuff like insurance, just inherently part of it, is pretty awful. So to have people fighting on your behalf, to really make sure that you can explore your craft and find a career is pretty extraordinary. Yeah, it's really cool. It was like one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people. They're inside. I was talking to Tim Friedlander, who I'm sure we'll talk about later. He's one of the big heads behind NAVA, who actually this entire audience has seen many years ago when Ace Combat 7 came out. Tim and I were on together chatting. Oh, that's amazing.
He's the voice of what's the AWACS? Oh crap. Chat, help me out here. What's the name of the AWACS? Not I was full band, he was
full band is a great name.
Yeah. Nice call sign. I can't remember what it was. In any case, he was on here. He was the AWACS. And that was like our Longcaster. Thanks. Oh, well, that's probably you, Tim. NAVA Voices, is that you? Are you in the chat? Tim's answering his questions about himself.
Hey, Tim, we love.
Yeah, so you guys are familiar with Tim. NAVA Voices can answer all of your questions in chat. If I don't know the answers to the question, just feel free to add him. in chat. That's Tim. He's a fantastic person with a fantastic voice, also extremely talented. And now I can't say bad
I have a
out of
career.
now. So, yeah, part of the reason we're here. So you said you wanted to say something about Brad. Tell me your story, Ryan.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have so many things to say about Brad. He was an extraordinary human being and an artist. And I think what you immediately made me want to tap into with him was, I think part of what made him such an incredible person and performer is he was so comfortable with being vulnerable and open in front of strangers. And from like not just a perspective of being in a workshop with people you may or may not know and just performing something raw and being comfortable with inevitably where anyone can just fall on their face, you know, like it's so easy to slip up, especially when you're doing something like in a theatrical setting, and you know, to feel that anxiety and to not want to give yourself over to something completely in worry of that, instead of just being like, let's go for it. And he was the same way as a person. When I first met him, I remember it was, you know, at a coffee shop. I had just happened to go into a place with another friend, and they had known each other, so they started talking. He was like sitting there, and then I was brought in and introduced, and it was without even, I mean, within 10 minutes, I was just involved in a conversation that was incredibly candid, you know, from his perspective of his life and all this stuff, and I was just allowed to be, you know, privy to this and have a dialogue with him. And I was like, this guy is so kind and open and willing to like share this stuff, you know, with a total stranger. And I admired that really deeply. And he spoke so highly of his peers, of this craft, of this industry, and he spoke loudly when he didn't like things that happened and didn't like the way things were being handled or people were being treated or whatever the scenario may be. He wasn't just soft, you know, he was powerful, and his kindness was big and his strength was large. And I don't think I know a single person that we know or you know, otherwise, that has met him that hasn't like walked away impacted. He was extraordinary.
He really was just a very kind, you said vulnerable. He was always like just very empathic, in tune with the people around him, whether he was at a huge party at the Fat Dog or he was or whatever, you know. It didn't really matter. I used to go on like double dates with him and his wife, and it was always very like warm, you know. It always felt like you're just kind of cozy by a fire when you're hanging out with Brad.
Like a Brad hug, dude.
Really,
oh my god.
seriously.
And he would know, like, from across the room, again, like in a party or something, he would like just sense, like, you know, if you're like a little like, I don't know what I'm, you know, where to stand, or like, and he would just like suddenly be there, and you'd suddenly get lost in conversation, and suddenly you're like, well, I'm having a great time now. Oh my god.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
He was the best. And it was a lead by example thing too.
He really was. You know, like, he really did lead by example.
Sorry, you were going to ask me a question.
Did you ever have a chance to taste that man's cooking?
No.
Dude, he used to make this like. He used to make this, but you just called it pork butt. He would post on wherever you were saying, he's got like, I got 12 pounds of pork butt incoming, and he'd come in with this giant crock pot full of just like the best pulled pork you've ever eaten in your life.
Oh my god, that's probably one of the great tragedies of my life, is that I will never know it.
It was just it was so good, and that dude, like his voice could shake. He was an opera singer, like he was a trained professional opera singer. That dude could shake a room, and he could transform. See, he honestly, and this is the first time as I'm saying it, I'm having a realization. He was like, to me, for voiceover, the way like Philip Seymour Hoffman was for film. Like, he could transform emotionally into spaces with his voice that could move me so deeply in ways that, like, and then you talk to him and it sounds nothing like him. It sounds like it's like nothing like his energy, and you're like, wow, how do you? He was like Meryl Streep, you know? Yeah,
like,
I get that. I totally get that. It was like,
you know?
He could be like he really could. He could change a lot. He could change a lot.
He was extraordinary.
He was fantastic. How did you? Well, since we're talking about like getting started, right?
Yeah.
And how Nava is helping people get started. How did you get started? Like, what's your origin story?
Well, beautifully so, Mr. Tim Friedlander is very much a part of my origin story, and 100% why I have a career. I'll try and truncate a lot of the long version, but I, growing up, even just as a wee one, I was obsessed with film, and I had my NES, I had my Nintendo system, I had my Sega Genesis. I was I was obsessed with Star Wars, and I would take my dinosaurs and my action figures and my parents' camcorder, and I was making movies. I wanted to be Steven Spielberg, and by the time I hit 12 years old, growing up in New York, it was hard for me to take the creative, imaginative side of being, an actor, director, whatever I thought I wanted to do. This was before the internet. This was like, go get a backstage from the newsstand, kid. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. So to me, it wasn't permeable. It felt like to do any kind of acting was like royalty. So by the time I was 12, I found guitar and was like, this is something I can just do. Mm-hmm. I can figure out how to play this thing. I can make my friends play instruments. We could start a band. We could write songs. There's a path here that I can control. And so for a very long time, from 12 to more or less into my early 30s, I mainly just focused on being in a band and touring and recording stuff. And I had done some theater, in high school, and made short films with friends, and always obsessively studied acting as a craft, but I didn't pursue it. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 2015 with my bandmates. And while we were still making music, I figured, well, I'm living in Los Angeles, may as well dip my toes back in for fun. Let's see if I can do some extra work. I was thinking I'll do background work. I'll get my, feet wet on set again. Right. I will learn the craft again. I'll start taking acting classes again. I'll, get headshots because you have to do all these things, right. Just being in LA, it's all this stuff. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have to treat it with respect, even if there are things that I think are silly, So I did all the things, and I started to get kind of the occasional background gig in a commercial or on a movie set. And it was fun to suddenly I was getting that bug back, and I wasn't even thinking about voiceover at first. And I was very loose with this kind of stuff. I was still focusing on the band. So cut to a couple of years later.
First of all, only Hollywood people ever have interrupt the middle of a story by saying cut to. That's just like...
Yeah, it shows you that I've always thought in movies too. Right? My brain is just broken. Yeah, exactly. It's so true.
It is.
I am now beginning of 2019. I'm working, a bunch of different jobs just to survive, while being in the band and stuff, because we're hemorrhaging money because no band makes money.
Because you're in music, right?
Because we're not Coldplay, you know? We essentially broke up, and it was the first time in a very long time in my life that I didn't have that as the center of my creative world or responsibility. And my body immediately internally switched and was like, oh, I'm supposed to be acting professionally, which is crazy. And I was, and at the same time, my job liquidated my entire department. So I was fired effectively and put on unemployment the same week that my band broke up. So I was like, clean slate. And I was in Los Angeles going, okay, I've got, X amount of money that's going to be theoretically coming in from the 6 months or so of unemployment, and I've got very little saved, because who can save on making that kind of scratch while being in a band in LA? So I've got realistically, and I'm going to take acting classes, do all this stuff, so that's money that's going to go here and here. So theoretically I've got 3 months that I can survive in LA, and I just hit the ground hard and started training aggressively and started taking any kind of extra work I could, and eating barely not, it was feral. It was survival mode, and it was scary. But I started getting little trickles of things, and then this voiceover job happened by accident, and I was like, oh, that's really satisfying. You just immediately get to play, and I fell in love. And then funny enough, in my acting class, a peer of mine brought me into a production, an on-camera short film that he was making that was directed by someone named David Sobolov, who is a stellar voice actor.
Great guy.
Yeah,
excellent guy.
We became fast friends, and by the end of that production, he asked me if I did voiceover, and I said, well, I've now thought about pursuing it, but I don't have a demo. And he said, well, let me help you produce one.
Right.
Then I met Tim through him, produced my reel there, and within a few weeks, I was working in some studios on I think Final Fantasy Remake was like one of the first things I ever booked. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, which is a really like hysterical, perfect, like very green moment thing where I went into that session. You didn't know what I was working on because it was like a bunch of NPC things. I was wearing a leather jacket when I walked in, so I'm just making all the noise in the world, like on this microphone.
Yeah.
Like, oh right, everything is, and meeting the engineer and the director and everyone for the first time, and just trying to be out of everyone's way and easy to work with. So I'm like super nervous, and they turn on the monitor and they walk in the other room, and I see on the script like Midgar, Cloud, and my brain is just like. And I wanted to go, do you guys know what this is?
Do you know? On the other side, have you played?
And just, I'm imagining them just being like...
Yeah.
But it was so kind, and yeah, that really was like the beginning of everything. And I was like, I can't go back.
Yeah, that's amazing. I had a career before I came to LA, but one of like the first jobs I booked in LA was Fox McCloud. I think I definitely booked it within the first 4 months I had been here. And
you were a Star Fox fan already.
Yeah, I mean, like I had played everything. And
that must have been mind blowing to be like, oh, guess what? You're this legendary franchise hero. Like,
it was to date, I think the only time I ever like got an email and then like jumped up screaming. I think, and like I remember like jumping up off the couch and just yelling like Fox McCloud, Fox McCloud, Fox McCloud. And it was just such a weird way that I got the job. It didn't make any sense. And all of a sudden,
how did it happen? I would love to know.
It was an online casting. It was completely open to everybody in the entire world.
Was it through what medium online? Like, how did you find it? How did you come to it?
I don't think I should say it because it's like it might be Nintendo proprietary, but like they posted this job somewhere where friggin' anybody could have auditioned for it.
That's fascinating.
I did.
Dude, it was meant to be. I mean, that's just how this stuff works.
It was pitched as, I think it was pitched as a voice match, but then like not structured or paid that way at all. And then it was like, oh no, we're doing like a mini movie, and you're Fox McCloud. Can you sign this NDA? Like it was a super weird.
That's
situation.
Fascinating. That is so fascinating.
It's so funny to think like how often people just straight up stumble into this career. I was like
most
that too.
Of us do.
Yeah, most of us are just like, well, sure, I guess. Do you do voice? Like we're like, do you do voiceover? And you're like, what?
Yeah, well, it's such a funny thing because it's like, love video games, love cartoons. Like, most of the most impactful things on me have been, voiceover performances, or, there's so much of that has changed my life. And yet, it was one of those moments where it took like, boom, like I couldn't process it. And I was like, oh, right. That's a job. Like,
yeah, it's a real job. And I remember like realizing, because I started in late 2013. And I remember realizing like, oh wait, I hear a lot of people talking throughout my day. Everybody got paid for that. Like everybody got paid for like that guy who's like, please stand clear of the closing doors. He got paid for that. Like somebody handed him money to talk into a microphone. Yeah. Can I do that?
I mean, dude, talk about like celebrities. That guy's a celebrity.
That guy's a celebrity. He should be on here, not us.
Yeah. That dude. I want to know his name. How do we not know that man's name?
Right? It's just ridiculous. Whoa! Somebody just dropped a solid $500 into the donation bin. Thank you, whoever that was.
Wow, thank you.
I have the bar, but I don't have the alerts set up for some reason.
Oh my god.
But
thank you so much.
Awesome.
That's extraordinary. And thank you everyone for hanging with us while we ramble on crazy things.
So like, all right, I'm thinking about like, all right, what Nava does? They do training. They do like, what kind of training did you do? Because my path was all weird and different, and I didn't do a lot. But I know that like, it's not always available. So like, how did you get involved?
So I've always been a couple of things, which is a huge film nerd, resourceful, and for a long time broke. So up until recently, like I was always just in survival mode. So a lot of the ways that I would educate myself, it wasn't necessarily, because a lot of the time I think we often talk to people who want to become actors in any capacity, and often their first hurdle is they don't have money for classes or whatever it is that they are comfortable with investing without it, going somewhere else that they need to, like rent or whatever, and which is understandable. And for me, I would do a lot of like, I'd buy books on film, on acting from secondhand stores or get them from the library. And a lot of people don't realize that you can get acting classes by literally reading books. I mean, I have them on producing, on writing, on everything. Like I am a nerd for story, for collaboration, for all the things that an actor needs to be able to be prepared to do. And if I wasn't able to be in a class with someone in that immediate time, I would get a book with plays and find a friend who was down to rehearse some stuff and work on it. Or, I would just watch movies and study them, or listen to performances and play video games, like use it as an excuse to take in media, but be attentive to it. Don't just let a movie make you feel. Really think about why that performance is making you feel, why those internal responses are matching the physical responses, or whatever it is. Like you can study a thing that you enjoy, and it can really inform you. I mean, one of my favorite things that I ever learned was from a David Bowie documentary, where he basically just talks about how great artists steal. And I was like, amazing. Yeah. And I try and take from every performance that has ever inspired me in some way, and like regurgitate it into something else and funnel into something else. There's probably, I'm sure every director I've ever worked with, even though they've forgotten what I've mentioned, will say like, oh yeah, at some point when we're working on a session for something, I'll mention some weird movie or novel or something, and I'll be like, oh, this reminds me of this character or this thing or this, like blah blah blah, and there'll be a reference that I will, because
right.
So I think that's an important thing for, like, if you're broke and you want to learn, go to the library and get a bunch of books on film, get plays, get things that you can study, and just play. Yeah.
One of the you said good artists steal. It's so interesting, like, in my like author days, like novel writing, when you steal as an author, like a lot of times it's like, well, you end up being derivative, right? Like it doesn't feel fresh. But when you steal as a musician, or you steal as like a voice actor, it's like you can't replicate whatever that was perfectly anyway. So now I think it was Pat Fraley was like, there are no bad impressions. There are just new characters.
Yes.
Right? My voice for Duke Detain is just a really bad Patrick Warburton impression. Like, that's all it is. But it comes out as like a fresh new character because I can't do Patrick Warburton.
It funnels through you, and it's also, it's the other things that we talked about that so beautifully Brad would show is, allow yourself to be vulnerable when you are, doing these things. I think the hardest thing, especially like for people who are new, I think one of the hardest things is to be vulnerable with auditions.
Yes.
Because they think it's like, especially because they're probably getting only a few at that time. You only get so many in the beginning.
Sometimes it's like very dangerous.
Yeah. So you see that one that you may have for that like 2 weeks or something, and you're like, this is my only chance. I have to impress everybody. And you overthink everything versus allowing yourself to be free in that moment and show them who the character is to you. And we all learn as we go that it's far better to take the risk, which doesn't even necessarily mean some outlandish choice, but to take the risk and trust that your interpretation of the character, regardless of you booking it or not, is still the better choice than panicking and trying to show them what you think they want, or going in with the energy of I need this job.
Exactly.
You know?
There's oh man, I'm listening to Matthew McConaughey's audiobook right now, right?
It must be so relaxing.
It actually is very relaxing, but that guy's like story and mentality about acting and all that stuff is just, it's very, very different. It's very different. It's really cool to listen to. But one of the things, one of his agents told him when he was young, and I'm gonna get the wording screwed up, but it was like, if you want Hollywood, you can't need Hollywood. Right? It's like a casting director, and I've always said like a casting director will smell desperation on your read a mile away. And the only way, this is like a business advice, it was like the only way to not sound like you need a job is to not need a job. I always encourage people like have a backup plan, you know, like so yeah, but like taking risks, super important. I think one of the most pieces of feedback, like as I went, because I didn't really start doing a lot of coaching until later in my career, when I was like, okay, now I'm established. I want to be very, very picky about the roles. I'm going to put a lot of this behind me, and I want to find very specific, fulfilling, dramatic work. And I would get feedback from casting directors. They're like, yeah, that read was exactly correct. And that would be like the end of it. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, right. Like that was, what a perfect read you just did, right? And so it really is about taking risks. And even if you don't book that job, but you make an impression, you still book the job. Like that's still a victory, because that casting director, I can't tell you how many times people have been like, oh yeah, you read for me 18 months ago. I want to bring you in for this.
Oh, dude, how many times, how many times have you had an email where you're like, I booked what? I didn't read for this. And then you get in there and you like, oh, hey. And they're like, oh yeah, we brought you in because you read for this thing 2 years ago.
Literally
and we
last
you'd
week.
Be great for this.
Like it actually happened. It happened twice in the last month. You know, it's just, you never know what seeds you plant are going to grow.
Well, and people are just in general, just like, I think people don't realize how much people are just paying attention,
right?
And also rooting for you. And it's not about immediate results. You know, it's about understanding that this is a lifestyle and a career, and it's not a fad. It's not something you can just dip your toes in. Something you have to commit to on a lot of different levels. And I was actually explaining this to a friend the other day, how there are some situations where maybe a casting director gets your audition and you might be the perfect choice, but they haven't worked with you. Nobody they know has worked with you, and this particular job has a lot riding on it, and they need to trust that you could be reliable, XYZ, blah, 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 blah. They may not know that you are, so they may sit on that audition and be like, let's just keep paying attention to this person. That was incredible. You may read for them 3 or 4 more times and still not book with them, but they're like, they're the one. And then eventually they're going to bring you in for whatever reason that lines up. And it's like, you may not know how often people are like, oh, you're already stellar, even though you may not be booking the thing. And you're thinking, what am I doing wrong? And they're like, oh my God, he's kicking ass. Now it's just a matter of like XYZ happening first. And it's hard to explain. All of this stuff is so amorphous. The entertainment industry is bizarre. And I think a lot of people who want to pursue voiceover in particular forget that while this is a small niche and we are lucky that people are relatively egoless and it's a really kind community, we're still in the entertainment industry.
Yes.
And it is still a machine, and there is still so much more at large than just this. And you have to be aware of that and educated with that and respectful of it. And it will only help your mental health along the way with this process.
Right. Now, how did you get involved? I heard this story before, but I forget some of the finer points, and I'm sure the audience maybe hasn't heard it yet. Well, actually, first of all, I brought this list up. I want to say thank you to Anonymous, but Miss Arcades, Vic Shadows, Reese Bridger, and Whiskey, who've all donated. Really appreciate your contributions to B Brad and Nava. It's it's a great cause, and you're directly helping voice actors and the voice acting industry. So thank you. We're actually almost at our goal, and we're barely halfway through the stream. So fantastic.
Amazing. Amazing.
How did you get involved? Like, what was your path to booking for Shahid? Because you made that comment about like, like they hear your audition, but then they don't book you for that because you're still a risk, and then later, and then boom. And that's essentially what happened to me with Fire Emblem, was that a colleague of ours, for whatever reason, mentioned my name to Cup of Tea and was like, you should check out Joe. I was very new. I mean, like, I had been in town for, I don't know, 2 years by the time that I was in this process. And then they booked me on a small part, and then another small part, and then Claude. So like, what was your path to, and so this all happened because
that's so cool.
Like, one person was like, check him out. And that was like seal of approval. This person is no longer a risk, which is what you were describing. Before that, you're a risk.
That is a huge part of it. First off, that's so super, super cool. I mean, you are so, allow me to gush at you for a second. You are so freaking good in that part. Thanks, man. It's so relaxed and fun and awesome, and I love it. And you take him into some really interesting places in the new game, which is really cool.
Yeah. It was fun to explore.
Super cool.
So what was your path to Shahid? How did you get there?
So the Cup of Tea crew also, they're incredible. They I think are really, they're familial in a way that they are very protective of who and how they work with people, but they are also incredibly open in a really badass punk rock way to letting in new people all the time, because they see the light in you, and they're like, you're part of it. Like, they don't put up a wall. They really open the door. But it was a similar kind of thing where I actually, through David Sobolov, I remember we were having lunch one day, and we were just talking about studios that I was working with, and because I was still so new that I had only been working at a couple of places around town, and he had mentioned them, and I was like, I don't think I've even heard of that name. And I didn't realize, like, oh, I've played a bunch of these games, and that's where they make them. Oh, that's amazing. And he told me to reach out to them. So I reached out on his behalf and just kind of said, hey, I'm new in town. David told me to reach out to you. And they immediately got back to me and were like, we love David. Okay, that's good to know. Send us your information. So awesome. I sent them whatever I had. And I didn't hear from them for a year, and which is how it goes, and I didn't think anything of it one way or the other. I just thought, well, I'm on their radar, and I remember we followed each other on like Instagram, and like, Danny would just write to me every now and then and just comment on other things I was booking, and it was just kindness, and they would see me doing other things. And then literally like a year later, she sent me an audition, and it was my first time getting to read for them. And I was like, oh, this is really exciting. And I knew certain things that they worked on. So I was like, oh, it could be all kinds of stuff. Oh my gosh, this is really cool. And so I read for it, and I didn't book it. And I was like, I've totally disappointed her.
Man.
Like in my, dumb actor stuff, I was still really green. So like, I was still thinking stuff like that. But I didn't. It's not like I reached out or anything, going like, "Hey, just so you know, I could do better," kind of thing. I just internally,
Thank God.
Yeah. But I internally thought, oh man, I know that they were rooting for. I could tell that obviously that was, the thing where they were like, let's give them the shot, and I didn't do it. And then I think it was like another 6 months until I got another thing, and then they sent me that. And then I didn't book that either. And then something else came, and then I booked that. And it was a small thing. And then I worked with them on another thing, which was the Shin Megami Tensei game, which was incredible. Yeah. And that was really when we like got to play, and I got to know them better. And then I cut to a couple of years later at this point. Right. And I get an email on like a Wednesday or Thursday night at like 9 o'clock at night from Patrick, who I've never spoken to before. Right. I know Patrick, I know his work, but I didn't know he knew who I was. At this point, the My Hero film had come out, so we had technically worked together. But again, I didn't think he knew who I was.
As much as any two voice actors really ever work together, right?
Right, exactly. So I was like, I'm just some other guy to him,
Right.
And but apparently he had my email, or I guess he got it through Danny, and so he sends me this obscure character with no real information on it. Like the whole thing was just kind of not what it was, and he's like, hey man, if you could you shoot me over this by tomorrow morning? And I'm like, hi, sure, cool. So I immediately go into the booth and I do a take and I send it over, and he gets back to me like 10 minutes later and he's like, oh awesome, can you send me one even crazier? And I was like, sure. So I go and I do an even crazier one and I send it in, and then like 2 or 3 days later I get word from my agents that they want me to go in for a project there. And I'm like, oh, I guess I booked that thing, not knowing anything of what it was or process. And then I get into the room and, Patrick's there and he's incredibly kind and warm and awesome. And he's kind of like smiling at me. And I'm like,
I love Patrick.
Yeah. Like,
he loves a good reveal.
Yeah, like he's got that big amazing grin. He's kind of like, and I'm like, and he's like, so we brought you in for this thing. Your read was great, and blah blah blah. And have you played Fire Emblem? And I'm like, yeah. Like, and he's like, did you play the last game? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh cool. Okay, so you're familiar. So you're gonna be playing Joe's brother. And I was like, what? Like, they showed me the art, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever.
That's fantastic.
Process, because they're like, okay, yeah, now get in the booth, and I'm like, I need like 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's the way it goes too. Like there was no preamble for Claude. It was just like, get in the booth. Like you don't have time for that crap. Get in the booth.
But that's the best thing about this job. At the same time, is it's always just get in the booth, and it's like, playtime is playtime, and there is, while it's equally terrifying, finding a character like immediately with a team of people is so exciting.
It is. And like you have the benefit of the audition too. It's just like, okay, we're gonna play your ref. We love that. That's why we hired you. You're obviously you're supposed to be here. Screw your imposter syndrome. Like, we literally heard this. This is you. Go. Like.
And the reality is, it's like, so much of it is then just take yourself out of the room. Mm-hmm. You're telling a story. Tell the story. Like, let the story talk to you and tell the story. Yep. And get out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Man, that's awesome. That's a cool story. And
I was so excited to get to, dude, like, to get to particularly play off of you. That was the coolest.
It was great. Those scenes were fantastic. Yes, they were fantastic.
And then sitting on it for like a year.
You played a phenomenal asshole. Like he was such a jerk. And like you as the player are torn. Be like, oh, that's my brother, but I hate him. But he's my brother. Oh, what a bastard. But brother, like it was so great. It was so great.
Fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love playing asshole characters. You just get
it's so fun.
It is fun.
It's really cathartic, and like you laugh after every take because you're like, oh, who says this?
Who says that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that's cool. Vera Meow and Una, thank you so much for your donations. We're $50 away from our daily goal.
Wow.
Nava's trying to, we're gonna smash it, but like Nava is trying to raise 50K for a bunch of stuff. And I'm gonna look at their their platform here, because they do so many things that it's difficult to remember them all. One of the things that I love that they do, because it's a very difficult landscape, as I'm sure you know, particularly in the non-union workspace, contracts. Like, the amount of exploitative contractual bullcrap out there for voice actors is just huge. And we're not business people, we're not lawyers. We make silly voices for a living. If we're lucky, we have some experience that lets us be savvy. But I worked with a company, just as an example, I worked with a company that essentially snuck in, hey, by the way, when you record for us, we reserve the right to capture your voice and use it for any third party, including AI simulation. So like, it doesn't take that, like, just, we're going to go on a little bit of a tangent again. Like, I've spoken with AI generation companies, and they're like, yeah, with about 2 hours of content, we can make a fairly accurate copy of your voice. And it was like, all of a sudden, basically in a contract, and I don't know that it was malicious, right? It was probably just boilerplate.
Right. Well, yeah, it's not necessarily like with intent, but the dangerous.
It's there, right?
Yeah,
You've got
the implications of it are incredibly dangerous.
2 sessions, and now you never have to hire me again because you own the rights to my voice, and it's being snuck into so many contracts. And like Nava provides contractual work, like standard contracts that you can use when you're out and like you're not booking a job with an agent, you're not all that stuff, and you can hand that to a client and say, hey, you need to fill out, because now you're empowered, I need to know where you're using this, for how long you're using this, and what you're using this for, and then I can quote you. But without that, I don't know what you should be paying me. So it's like it helps, Nava helps facilitate that conversation, which is super cool. I don't know, Tim, do you guys have like a team of lawyers? I'm asking Tim in chat, like, how did you come up with all this stuff? You should just dial in. Get on Skype, that'd be amazing. Get in here.
Can we get him to call in?
Can I think I can.
He has the most glorious voice, so it would be
Are you busy? Everything. Tim, are you busy? What are you doing, Tim? Tim, what are you doing?
Tim, you eating?
Tim, what are you
got something in your mouth right now? Because like
he says he's working on the lawyers, but there's plenty of like, essentially like, boy, he has a session at 10. Of course you do. Stop working so much, Tim. Stop being talented. God, we're trying to waste time here. Yeah, Jeff says say his name 5 times and you will summon him. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Felicia, Angel, and Color Junkie, thank you so much for dropping us over the edge of our goal for today.
Oh
fantastic.
My gosh.
I love
Hi,
you guys.
Friends.
That's so good. What was I even talking about?
Bologna sandwiches.
I was talking about bologna sandwiches, and I don't like
lawyers
them. Even without
and contracts and the safety of protecting yourself with AI voices. And
yeah,
I mean, the reality is like most actors in general are not built in any way, shape, or form to protect themselves out. Like, all they're thinking about is like, be creative, have fun,
right.
And like the rest of this stuff is where things get real squirrely. But it's so important to educate yourself as much as possible in order to be able to have a career, frankly.
Right.
Like, the stuff that you ultimately don't think is the fun stuff or don't want to deal with is the stuff that's going to give you longevity and an actual life doing what you love. And it's the trade-off, you know. That's just kind of part of it. And it's better to be in control, you know, in a world where you can be in control of your craft and your career. Take those reins instead of allowing them to be held by somebody else, you know.
Right. And I think as the work landscape shifts, as it's been shifting basically since the early 2000s, that like union work becomes more difficult to capture and non-union work is more widespread, there needs to be some kind of stopgap, right, to prevent the rate free fall that's been happening. You know, there's like a huge, not like a talent glut, what am I trying to say, but it's like there's so many actors out there that it's becoming easier and easier for a client, and again, I'm not assigning malignancy, but like a client to pivot very quickly from someone that is gonna like be like, no, you can't have license to use this in perpetuity on all mediums,
right,
to someone who's like, I don't know what in perpetuity means.
Right.
And Nava is like really making an effort to get themselves out in front of that, which is awesome. Voice acting and acting as an industry is not known for being ahead of the curve, you know, like anticipating what happens in the future.
Well, and the reality is I don't think until now we've ever seen the industry have such a spotlight either.
Yes,
you know,
totally.
And I don't think it was necessarily prepared for it in the best of ways. So like, you know, as we all kind of go through this together in this really awesome, exciting transitionary period, we have to really do it with grace and with an education and with, you know, an ability to also protect and pass down this for the next wave of people who are coming through. Like, I've only been at this a couple of years, and I've been really fortunate to have a lot of, incredible opportunity thanks to different people giving me a chance and things being available to me at the times that they needed to be when and me being aware of how looking to find them. Like, I didn't have a home set up until right before the pandemic happened. Like, essentially I was, and it was a timing thing too that was just beautiful. I was at a voiceover convention in February, at the end of February, and one of the vendors there was Vocal Booth To Go. And I see this thing and I'm like, well, this is pretty incredible. And this is something I can afford on the budget that I have, which is, peanuts. So, and I can set it up in my apartment that I know I'm not going to be staying in, so I don't want to get a studio bricks, and like cement that thing into my life.
I moved the studio bricks 3 times. Now let me tell you, way better than like a Whisper Room or LA Vocal Booth where you got to unscrew stuff. It was like it came apart like Legos. One person can carry every piece. Fine.
But that's still
it was. I didn't like it.
Yeah, but, that's intense. Yeah. But I essentially found them, and then like 3 weeks later, I was ordering one because I was like, oh, I'm gonna be home forever. Yeah. And it literally saved my life. It saved my career, and I was able to do everything from home. And that was really where my career actually like took off, which is crazy. Is like, while I was just isolated, it's kind of bananas how it all can work. So
that's cool.
Your life can change dramatically with this career in the most beautiful ways, but you have to be able to protect yourself and be ready for that thing, emotionally and otherwise. And the fact that there are people out there and organizations like this that want to protect you, like we have to give back to them and protect them. We have to give them the ability to only grow larger and facilitate this on a larger scale, because this is how we preserve an industry.
Absolutely. Ryan, I know you got to go in like 10 minutes here. We haven't opened it up to the audience at all for Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of like look at chat, and there's like a little bit of a delay, so 15 seconds or so we'll start to get some questions. But yeah, if you guys got questions for me or Ryan or both or whatever, drop them in chat and we'll answer them for the last little bit that Ryan is here. Thank you guys so much again for all the donations to NAVA. They do stuff like they're like offer financial assistance and scholarships so people who can't afford to go to workshops can go to workshops. They've got that stopgap health insurance, which is super, super important. Not just of like, there are lots of reasons why people keep health insurance, right? And not always for the right reasons. If they're in a relationship that's not really healthy for them, or they're in a job that's not really healthy for them, or whatever. This sort of thing helps out, as well as like, keep helping us understand like what we're supposed to charge and like stepping up with the contract stuff. They're really awesome group. Bye, Tim. Tim's leaving. Enjoy your session.
Bye, Tim. We love you, buddy.
Talented, whatever, so-and-so. What are your future plans in the industry, and do you know any Arabic? Ryan, do you know Arabic?
Sadly, no. My father speaks it fluently, and my grandmother speaks it fluently, and it is one of the most beautiful languages in the world. But I'm lucky I can speak English.
Lebanese? Or am I guessing?
No, Iraqi.
Iraqi, okay.
Yeah. I'm lucky I could speak English. I was born and raised in New York City, and I've always wanted to learn, and one day I think I will actually sit down and study it, because it is truly beautiful.
Now, correct me if you know, Iraqis, they don't speak Levantine, right? What's the dialect in Iraq? Do you know?
Well, Arabic is quite prominent, but I don't know.
No, I know that. I'm sorry. I minored in Arabic in college, so I do speak some Arabic.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I speak Fusha, like I speak modern standard, which is newspaper, right? And so like in Lebanon, Syria, they speak Levantine or something like that, and then Egyptians.
I don't know.
I can't remember what dialect Iraq speaks. I'm just curious if you knew.
Yeah, no, I wish I knew offhand. I don't.
What are your future plans in the industry, Ryan? Where do you want to go from here? Since both of us have peaked. I mean, there's nowhere to go from here.
I mean, for me, there's a couple of answers to it, I guess, sort of. Part of me is always just most excited about the thing that I don't know exists yet. You know, like I just love the next adventure.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just tell me a story. Again, that just goes back to that, and let me be a part of something and explore emotions, you know, in a fun way, and try something different and exciting and scary. And I have dreams, scenarios of like, would I love to work with Kojima one day? Would I love to work with,
that'd be
you
cool.
know, Guillermo del Toro? You know, like I would love to get back on camera and do film and TV work again. I mean, I love storytelling in every way, and from mocap to whatever way you can get me to help you tell your thing, I want to be a part of it. And I mean, I'm writing comic books with a friend.
Awesome.
You're a writer as well. It's like, I think, you know, you're a musician as well. It's that thing where I think we just love creating.
Yeah, you
and
just can't stop. You get really grumpy when you don't.
Yeah, well, it really is a filter system, right, for your emotions and your feelings. It's cathartic, whether that's whatever emotion it is a system to channel that. And then it's like one is doing it one way, another is performing it. There's so many ways that it is like a release valve. And I think people like us need that, you know, to operate. What about you?
I don't really know. I mean, like, I would love to get back in the mocap suit. Mocap is just ridiculously addictive. It's so much fun to do.
You do amazing creature sounds and stuff too. Like
do I really?
Oh, dude, I've seen your TikToks and all the things.
The
and
TikToks are a different beast, but yeah, they can be kind of fun.
But just the way that you can just like that shape into, you know, a different being is really, really fun.
Well, thanks, man.
I feel like you could play some wild creatures.
It's fun. Like creatures, I believe it or not, most of the time I'll pass on creature auditions.
Well,
that
no,
come by.
I understand why.
Yeah.
I completely understand why.
They tear you up, man.
Yeah,
they really tear you up. And like, I still do a lot of like corporate commercials, so you know that's kind of like you're burning the breadbasket if you do too much of that
and
stuff.
Also in a world where Kellen exists, nobody else has a chance.
You know,
none of
like,
us should even try.
Yeah, I've been in sessions with like D. Bradley Baker, and I'm like, just call him. Just don't call me for this. I'm just gonna make a fool of myself.
But you're also like, but also call me so I can just watch.
Call me, yeah. He was so fun. Was he yelling into a trash can? I don't remember what he was doing.
Dude.
He was doing some kind of monster voice on Lego, and he was just ridiculous.
I've seen the trash can approach before, and that blew my mind.
Yeah, super cool.
I actually did the trash can technique when I made movies, and I wanted a character to sound like he was using like a machine gun. I would spit.
Right.
I would spit popcorn kernels into a metal trash can on camera.
That's amazing. Other than that, I got this course. I'm doing a voiceover course, like a 20 hours of content, like hundreds of lessons kind of thing. And it's just
amazing.
It's going to eat up most of my time until the end of the first quarter. And then we'll see what happens there. Someone's asking if you had any really funny moments while you were recording Chainsaw Man. I imagine you did.
No, none at all.
None at all.
Of course,
very serious show.
I mean, it's constantly funny. There are obviously very intense, dark, and poignant moments, but some of the funniest moments are usually because Sarah, who voices Power, has already recorded, and I'm trying to just get through scenes that she's already got stuff in the background in my ear. There are definitely times that I've just said a thing, in that, like, there are times you just get dialogue in that, and I'm like, I'll say the thing, and then I can't believe I just got to say that, and I'll just burst out laughing, or the notes Mike will have to give based on a thing and wanting to like try a different version of it. The way he'll have to phrase things are so funny just because of the circumstances.
And he says it, and he's got that kind of bold voice, right? Like he and I went to New Zealand together actually on a convention tour just this summer, so I got a chance to meet him. So like I imagine like listening to him, well, this is how you have to slit this person from groin to neck, like
it can be vulgar and hysterical. We giggle like we're in a locker room the whole time.
Yeah, I bet. Ghost asks, as a voice actor, what's your version of climbing the ladder? Interesting way to phrase that. Is it how big the role is, or mocap ? What do you think? I have thoughts about that. What do you think about that?
I don't know if I understand the term. I think like I'm gonna rephrase it, because climbing the ladder to me sounds like you're intentionally trying to like take from the thing,
right?
Versus like be a part of the thing. But I think if they're talking about like trajectory. I mean, part of me feels like I kind of already answered it. I don't know that there is a ladder. I think
I don't think there's a ladder.
The thing about acting is like, I do gigs still where I'm the background. I still do Walla sessions. I do everything because to me it's just a day to play. I don't think about how big the role is. I think about, am I going to enjoy doing this? Is this something that I want people to see? Is this something that I will have fun being a part of? Do I like working with these people? Mm-hmm. It's rare that I will say no, if a job is brought my way, unless it's something that I don't believe in or connect with, because there's just so much fun to just play, and it's not about
it's not a ladder, there's no playground, right? It's like,
yes.
and you're not really like climbing anything, because the industry is not very, I mean, it's competitive, it's bloated with talent, but like you're not competing. It's not about rejection. It's about selection.
Well,
right?
It's also not a cool kids club. Like
right,
the
not
idea,
at all.
like if the idea is like you think that there's a table where certain people are sitting that like you can't go up to and hang because like you haven't booked a certain kind of role, or like that's where things get really messed up.
Right.
We are all just very grateful and lucky to be able to do this stuff, and we are all nerds to one degree or another, and just passionate about doing this, and are just human beings. And this is about, it's a job at the end of the day, and it's just about sharing with people instead of blocking people out. So yeah, I don't see it as like an opportunistic thing.
No, and it really, like, it always depends on like I said, there's no ladder, there's no singular ladder to climb. It also is like, how do you define success? Because I know tons of voice actors that are making a killing. Their bank account is overflowing, and you've never heard of them, and you never will. And then I know people that like have hundreds of thousands of followers on lots of different platforms, and they're just like kind of scraping by, but like that satisfies them. It all depends on like what's success to you. Is it about making money? Is it about being famous? Is it about being creatively expressive? All of them are fine goals. Like, I'm not here to poop on any one particular kind of them. But
don't
it's just
poop
like,
on stream,
I
Joe.
don't. Yeah, that's. I'll get kicked off Twitch real fast. So it's really is like how you define success. Ryan, what book are you reading right now?
That's actually crazy that I have it literally sitting right next to me.
I haven't read that one.
Yeah, I will.
How
since
far
it's probably
in are
flipped,
you?
it's The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I am up to chapter 6 right now, and it's beautiful. It's weird and beautiful and sad and funny and very Neil Gaiman. It's kind of like an adult bedtime story.
Okay.
It's very odd. Like, I feel like it's just about to turn, as well. So I'm not sure what's around the corner.
Yeah, I don't know that like he's really like known for it always being a happy-go-lucky story. It really does get, like.
Well, he has an extraordinary control of genre where he can melt so many different flavors together, and it feels so timeless, and his way with words is really beautiful. So it's one of those things where he has one of those voices too. Talk about voices where like
he's very nice to listen to.
And I can hear him, like I hear him when I read,
Yes.
It's one of those things. So I feel like I read his prose the way that I've heard him speak. And he has these like he's almost like, it's like how, when you hear Christopher Walken, like, how he's going to have his cadence.
Right.
And so it makes me read it at a certain pace. But I love Neil Gaiman. What about you?
I just finished a trilogy, this fantasy called, I don't know what the trilogy is called, but the books were City of Brass, Kingdom of Gold, and I can't remember.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like you take a lot of the fantasy tropes, but you set it in Arabic mythology instead of like European mythology. So it's all about like jinn and like the Ifrit and stuff like that. Really,
I need to
cool.
get on this.
It was really cool. The writing is very fast-paced and snappy, and the characters are good. It was, as many books are, like they're a little bit of a rocky, slow start, and then maybe like 10%, 15% of the first book, I was just off to the races, and then I slammed all the way through it.
Well, so much of it is it has to build the world and introduce you, and you have to settle in. It's sometimes it's a world that you need to prepare yourself
Yeah.
for. That's so exciting. I have to grab those.
It's a great book series, and not well. It's as many trilogies. It's like reasonable. Oh, that's a big book. Whoa, you know, like for books 1, 2, and 3.
And then suddenly you're like,
As it happens, you're like, oh god, I can't carry this. But it's a good book. And then I said I was listening to Matthew McConaughey's audiobook, which I recommend.
Yes.
He's just what a character. So yeah. But dude, I know you got to get going. You said 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, brother. Oh my
Thanks
God.
for
Thank
being
you
here.
all for having me.
It's been good to chill out.
This has been incredible. I am so grateful for everybody who's hung out and donated. This is truly how we keep this industry and this community going forward. So thank you guys for being here and sharing and helping your peers and people grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ryan. We're gonna get a beer soon or something like that. Make some
Let's
music.
hang,
There's
dude.
music in our
Thank
future.
you.
I know it is. I don't know what it's gonna be. But
Oh yeah,
it's gonna
please.
happen,
I would
so.
be honored.
Okay, thank you,
you
Ryan.
so much, buddy.
Thank you, everyone. I will see you Monday. It's Friday, right? I think it's Friday.
Yeah.
I'll
it is
see you
Friday.
Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for coming by.